Patrick Christie's every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GBNews. Be there.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation. I'm Andrew Doyle. Tonight we will be discussing Stonewall. We'll also be discussing if there's too many white people in the English women's football team. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. My guests today are Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon, everyone. So, Lewis, how are you today? You seemed in a bit of a bad mood.
I'm in a bad mood. I don't even know why I'm in a bad mood. I got free-floating because I've just been in America.
You've just been in America. You bought me a lovely T-shirt, I Heart New York T-shirt.
Yes, exactly.
It looked cheap, to be honest, but you did make the effort anyway.
Do you know what? It was cheap. It was £10 in the airport.
£10. You should have told me that.
I took the price tag right off of it.
But the problem is, actually, I don't really like New York, so to wear the T-shirt saying I Heart New York is misrepresentative.
Well, do you know something that says a lot about you?
Oh, I see. Have you been to New York? No?
I never have, but I get enough of it from Lewis. And I like doing the show with Lewis because for once I'm the least neurotic one.
Yeah.
But it's very close. It's the battle between me and Lewis.
Listen, we've got some questions from the audience, and we're going to crack straight on with that. Who's our first question from today?
Hi.
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 What's your name?
Joel.
Hi, Joel. How are you doing?
Were donors right to cancel the funding from Edinburgh University?
Were donors right to cancel the funding from Edinburgh University? So this is an interesting one. Have you heard about this story, Lewis?
I did hear about it, and first of all, I was shocked at how little money Edinburgh University gets every single year from donors. They get 23 million pounds.
They get a lot of money, but do you know the backstory to this? I mean, what effectively happened was there was a David Hume Tower at Edinburgh University, which has now been renamed as 40 George Square, which is a boring name for a boring building. I mean, architecturally, it's really dim. But they've changed it because David Hume, of course, the sort of this major figure of the Enlightenment, once said something in a footnote in the mid-1700s, which by today's standards is a bit racist. OK? But,
I do not. What did he say? I don't like black people.
He didn't say that. It was regarding. I can't remember what the footnote actually said. But by today's standards. But look, this is a man who existed in the 18th century, so he's likely to have views that would be out of date today. It would be weird if he didn't have views that were out of date today, wouldn't you say? So they renamed the tower, and a lot of people got upset about it and got angry about it. And now a lot of donors, because of course these universities rely on their alumni to give money to them. And now they don't have that money. 2 million they've lost. What do you make of that?
Go woke, go broke. It's a classic.
Right.
Yeah, it is absurd. He had one dodgy footnote, that is true, but you're talking about Hume, a great thinker who... They're annoyed he didn't have the exact views that we have now, even though he died 246 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Was progressive for the time, which I thought these people liked, but it's like, no, you don't have the exact views we have now. So it's this kind of totalitarian year zero thinking. The past has got to be erased. And like you say, they're actually getting punished.
It's very bizarre. It's very odd. And, but it's quite a relief to see that people are actually reacting to it, because I think money talks in these situations.
It does, but I worry, can we ever do enough? Because they always seem to find money from somewhere. Maybe China. I don't know where they get their money. Is it Soros? I don't know. The internet tells me it's Soros. I don't know, but there's always money for these leftist causes.
This is very interesting.
Well, I think he's probably turning on his grave that building, we've been to Edinburgh many years. We go there every year, practically.
Yeah, us three go on holiday to Edinburgh together.
And
in Lewis's camper van.
It was an abomination that they built that building. They tore down beautiful Georgian...
oh, no, I agree. The building itself I don't like at all.
Yeah.
But I think the principle of renaming it on the basis that this important Enlightenment philosopher doesn't quite have the same ideas that a few intersectional activists from 2022 have. It doesn't really make sense, does it?
No, it does make sense, because in the future they'll have that building they'll be able to rename with someone donating a lot more money. And I'm not...
And that's what it's all about.
And that's what it's all about. And I'm not so sure that David Hume even gave any money for that building. So...
You know what? I'm sure he didn't, but I don't think he would have liked that building. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Who knows? We've got another question now from Mary. Where's Mary? Hi.
Hi.
Hiya.
Is using fake tan an example of white privilege?
Is using fake tan white privilege? This was an article this week that came out in the Metro by someone called Lila Woozer, and she was making the case that white women who use fake tan are basically exercising white privilege. And this is what she said. She said, fake tan is not just normalised and accepted, but thriving. It's one of the most openly accepted double standards of white privilege. While people of colour face violence on how we look, white people use our appearances as a fashion trend. This has been going on a lot now. I've actually heard this argument for many, many years, but Yeah, I have. This isn't new necessarily, but this is just a new
You
take
made
on
us
it.
read this article, and it lowered my IQ points by about 10. I think Andrew wants to be the only smart person left, and he forces us to read this bilge. So this was... the argument was it's sort of mocking or people of colour. It's like, no, it's just white people trying to look how they look in the summer, but more often. That's
But
all
don't you
it
think
is.
there is something odd about the way that people, not just white people, but the people lie on a beach and they bake themselves?
It's not for me.
No.
You know, but I don't see anything wrong with you want to look slightly... People are more attracted to people, I think there's studies on it, like, who look slightly tan, and so people try and get slightly tan. That's all it is.
Where does that leave the sort of pasty-faced Celtic people like me?
Well, and me, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
I even had skin cancer, so I can't even go in the sun anymore. So, well, actually, we need fake tan. Actually, I medically need it. That's the only way I'm going to get a tan.
Is that true? You need
actually,
fake tan?
I've only just thought of that. I'm against it on those grounds as well. But yeah, why not? Why can't we have fake? It's not a racial statement, is it? It's just saying we look like white people look a bit darker in the summer, and we like that look, so do it more often. She's taking it as like a racial attack. She said, "I can't believe it's even legal." I'm like, what?
I mean, that's quite extreme, isn't it? What do you make of this?
Well, it just shows how crazy people are. Is they're upset that people are trying to look like them. I mean,
but I don't think people. This is her point. I mean, she thinks that white people who are using fake tan are trying to mimic or ape or almost like mock people of colour. I don't think that's what's happening here.
No, that's possibly one thing. Historically, women didn't try to get a tan because they didn't want to be associated with being out in the sun working all day.
Ah, that's interesting.
Okay, so
perfect porcelain white skin.
Yeah, so now it means that they have enough money to fly to some place that has sun to get off this horrible island.
So it's just a more status symbol.
It's a
this
status
horrible
symbol.
island. I almost let that go.
Yeah, but
although Lewis,
no, they didn't even notice.
No, exactly, because they're self-hating.
Although now we have catastrophic climate change, aka 2 hot days.
Yeah.
It's now you now get a tan just being in England. So it's all very confusing. The one point she did have, which I thought was maybe almost a point, kind of interesting, was she said the problem was then she feels she has to start using fake tan. So then you get into this kind of escalating arms race of like who can be more tan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they were using tan. She's like, hang on, I'm already tan. Do I have to now use fake tan on top of it? So you do get into a kind of escalating war of tans.
I've just never understood the.
But there's an issue that you should be sort of more observant of or knowledge of.
No, you always criticise me, Lewis.
Yeah, because
you're pointed as well, very aggressive.
because
aggressive.
you're gay, so you know what women are doing. Naturally.
I'm gay, so I know what women are doing.
Yeah, of course, you're like born with that kind of gay things. That's basically.
What does that mean? I don't know.
It means that you have a sort of a. I don't know what women are. I don't know what women are doing. I know I have to ask people what women are doing, but gay people.
What do you mean what they're doing?
Because what women are.
You mean when they're in court with you? What?
Lewis, let's let him express the point.
Sorry.
When you say what women are doing, do you mean what they're thinking?
What they are thinking, and what they're thinking when they put the makeup on, and what they're thinking when they criticize somebody who's putting makeup on. Women have respect for active beauty. They like the idea that they are not necessarily born beautiful, but they made themselves beautiful.
What I don't understand about this, right? No,
Is
wait
there
a minute.
truth to that?
Lewis, you claim that you have no understanding of women, and yet you pontificate as though you know exactly what's going on through their minds.
Because I've seen a YouTube video.
I just love it when Lewis says women, and you think, where's it going? It's already funny.
I think we already know where it's going to go. I know, because it makes me nervous. No,
Yeah.
I would just say I don't think that gay people have a particular insight into women or anything, really.
You would say that.
I think Lewis is saying they befriend women and then they secretly infiltrate them and find out their secrets.
Because they spent a lot of time with whatever it is.
Yeah,
okay, forget about that part. Here's, maybe
Forget about the homophobic.
Maybe. Let me go into misogyny.
Okay, yeah. Let's segue seamlessly from homophobia to misogyny.
Is that this woman is critical of other women who are taking active steps to be beautiful. Okay,
Yes.
in their
you
mind,
mean the author of this article?
the author of this article
Yes.
is a bit resentful of other women who are doing something to become beautiful because they feel it's cheating.
No, but I don't think she's doing that because she's an attractive woman herself.
I love that we're wondering where that sentence was going. It turns out towards Alzheimer's. Was the answer.
So, Nick, does Lewis have a point that there's a kind of resentment about this?
She's claiming it's not about the beauty. She's claiming it's pure. Well, it's 2 points, to be fair to Lewis. One is she's saying it's sort of mocking people of colour in some weird way or appropriating them, which is mental. But number 2, she's saying it creates a kind of impossible beauty standard. We all have to be tan all the time, which I have a little bit more time for.
OK. All right. Well, interesting. We got there in the end. Our next, with some digressions from Lewis. Our next question is from Barrett. Barrett, welcome back.
Yeah. should a black domestic... Oh, sorry. Should a black domestic abuse victim contact the police?
Should black domestic abuse victims contact the police? I would say yes. I think all victims obviously should contact the police. But this is a different story. This was reported this week in the wake of the death of George Floyd. There's a group called Women Against Abuse, which is one of the largest domestic violence non-profits. They brought in several diversity consultants to conduct what they call a racial equity audit. And the goal of the audit, apparently, was to become so that Women Against Abuse would become a fully inclusive, multicultural and anti-racist institution. But what that effectively means is that they were saying to their white staff members that they had to sign a document saying that all white people were racist. And some people weren't very happy about this. And they were also encouraging black women not to report instances of domestic violence. What's going on here, Nick? Like, this doesn't make sense.
Absolutely mental. Whenever you hear the term diversity, what do they call officers, diversity and inclusion officials, whatever.
Overlords.
Yeah, I always think you've just destroyed your organisation. They always turn into Ponzi schemes. Stonewall is perhaps the best example. Stonewall have this thing, as you probably know. They say to the BBC, oh, you can be top of our diversity chart. How do you get to top of it? Oh, you ask Stonewall and you give them money. Ask Stephen Nolan. This is not me saying this. Stephen Nolan uncovered this. So this is as soon as they brought these diversity people in, it immediately destroyed their organisation. White people had to sign a thing saying, white people are racist and I'm no exception, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And quickly, they had an escalating problem with domestic abuse, but they stopped solving that and they started focusing on internal sort of contretemps between the members, attacking each other based on you're not progressive enough. And basically, identity politics poisons everything.
And it's incredible because the diversity, equity and inclusion groups and the people who put themselves up for these jobs, they're earning a fortune. I mean, there's so much money to be made out of this stuff, and it often just tears things apart. I mean, it becomes a very kind of... It's almost a kind of very reactionary movement, I think. What do you think, Lewis?
Well, this has been going on for years and years. Back in the day, you know, with Reverend Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, people were giving out money. But I think something like this is good because I know there's a tremendous bond between black domestic abusers and white people.
What on earth are you saying, Lewis?
Is that they're saying a black man cannot be a domestic abuser?
I think what they're... Well, I don't know if they are saying that. I think what they're saying
I'll tell you what
is,
happened there. Go. Oh,
no,
sorry.
but I think what they're saying is calling the police on a black individual is dangerous because they believe that the police are institutionally racist and want to hurt black people.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's based on probably false statistics anyway, but yeah, they had the idea you shouldn't call the police if you're a black domestic abuse victim because they'll sort of shoot you anyway. It's basically the idea.
Yeah.
So it's an absurd idea. I mean,
there was this idea that the police were sort of just randomly shooting black people, and the statistics just didn't... It wasn't true.
Correct.
But of course, given what had happened with George Floyd, you can understand the strength of emotion there because that was such a horrible example.
Can I edit that bit out?
Well, it's a live show, Lewis. And the problem is when you say... Look, it's fine. People will forgive you.
Yeah.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I didn't understand the question.
Well, at least you're man enough to admit it.
I found some actual things. I meant to get my notes because I wanted to get it right. They actually had a scheme that also paid people of colour more, but then they dropped that scheme because it was illegal and too controversial. Yeah. So they dropped that.
It just gets them in a big mess, I think, all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and the homicides, domestic homicides reached an all-time high of 43 in 2021, more than double the previous year. But they were so focused on these arguments, like I say, that they weren't tackling it.
Right.
Isn't that crazy? Oh, and they also had a thing about Jewish people. They had an argument within them whether they counted as oppressed and whether they were more oppressed than black people, and that became
whether Jewish people counted as oppressed?
Or whether they counted as white.
Do you mean historically? Because I think... They were.
Yeah, no, sorry, not counted as oppressed, but who was more oppressed.
I see. But what? This is the problem, isn't it? When you get into this intersectional stuff, you end up with these games, who's the most oppressed?
Yeah.
Because there is a kind of cachet and power in being a victim.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is something new, and it's not positive, and it's not helping anyone. Anyway, we're getting very serious.
Can I restate what I said before?
Look, Lewis, you made such a mess of it that I'm nervous now about giving you a second chance.
No one. I think what this is doing, this whatever the word that you're using, intersection.
You don't even know what the word means.
No, because I try not to pay attention to this because it's lunacy. But what it's doing is it's saying to, let's say, a black man that his oppression is less than a black woman's oppression, which builds a sort of a bridge between those two groups. And that's driving, I've noticed, a lot of black men into the arms of white racists.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes, you do.
I don't.
Can you see? You see that?
Do you know what he means?
No, but I'm waiting because sometimes at the end of it there's gold. And frequently there isn't, but we wait for that one nugget with Lewis.
Lewis, I'm going to put a stop to this. Our next question now is from John. Where's John? Hi, John.
Hi. Should Dave Chappelle's show have been cancelled? OK,
so again, Dave Chappelle is back in the headlines, and this was a sold-out comedy show in Minneapolis, cancelled at the last minute, and this was because of a backlash, inevitably, from activists who were angry about, a comedian doing comedy. And this is happening again and again with Chappelle. I mean, you've met Chappelle, haven't you, Lewis?
He tried to get me fired, yes.
Right, and you've told me that story before, and I know there's a level of bitterness.
The only comedian more offensive than Dave Chappelle, ladies and gentlemen.
Forget about your personal gripe.
Yeah.
Right, and just think about the thing. He had a show, it was sold out, he goes to do it, day before, it gets cancelled because some people who weren't even going to go and see the show are upset about the show. Surely that's a problem.
I think it is a problem. I think it's a problem for Dave Chappelle. He wakes up one day and he's as offensive as a failed middle-aged Jewish comedian, Louis Schaefer. So he wakes up and
Isn't it unfair though, Lewis? Because you are, if anything, more offensive than Dave Chappelle.
It is.
But you don't have the level of success.
Well, do you know?
No. I don't mean that in a mean way.
So you're saying they should call me up and I'll do his slot. I'll do his.
I would love to see that. I think you're a brilliant stand-up.
It's not that mean. Dave Chappelle's like a multi-millionaire. He's got more success than 99.9% of comics. So that's all of us. So that's
all humans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't at all a criticism.
But I think the point I was making is Dave Chappelle, who I've known for many, many years, he has never been questioned in anything that he said because it was just assumed that wherever he came from was a place of goodness. And
so that's interesting, isn't it? Because now people mistrust him. This is often the case when people are offended by stand-up comedians. Yeah. Because they don't trust the motives and they're thinking, oh, you're joking about sexuality, therefore you might be homophobic.
We do not trust him.
Or you're joking about race, therefore you might be racist.
Yeah.
With him, they always trusted him.
And now he hasn't been trusted. Right. And that's why I feel for Dave Chappelle, he lived a charmed life. He started when his comedy when he was 14, 15 years old. And people loved him and trusted him. And now they're looking at him. And I don't know if you've had this. I know when they look at me and they say, we don't like this guy.
I mean, I have had that. But I don't take that personally.
And it's Dave Chappelle's waking up one day and saying, wait, I'm Dave Chappelle. How can you not like me? I look like the guy from the dinosaur in Dino. What's that thing?
I don't know, but he is well-liked. And I think that's
He is still well-liked.
Still very well.
And so he's banned in Minnesota. Screw those people.
Well, yeah, fair enough. What do you think, Nick?
Well, I look forward to a week when Dave Chappelle isn't cancelled, firstly, because that seems to happen every time now.
All the time.
And the problem is, if someone like he is cancelled, it obviously has this chilling effect on every other comedian. If the famous, great Dave Chappelle... And that's why they do it. They attack him so much, and they know that that's going to sort of attack comedy in general.
Yeah.
Basically, comedy's dead. But I do want to get the quote right, because...
You're catastrophising a little bit.
No, comedy's dead. I've given up on it. But I'm now a serious commentator. But the laughs at that. The First Avenue concert venue said, I want to get it right, we believe in diverse voices and the freedom of artistic expression. So you cancel a black stand-up comedian. Who stands up? Who is emblematic of diverse voices and freedom of expression more than Dave Chappelle? It's absolutely absurd. They also added this. They said the First Avenue team... Hang on. Oh, yeah. They said they've worked to make our venues the safest spaces in the country. I'm like, if you're a nuclear bunker, that is a great advert. But you're a concert venue, it's not your job to be the safest spaces in the country.
It's very bizarre. Look, let's move on. We've got a question here from email. This came in from a chap called Dave. And Dave has said, what do you think of Maureen Martin's dismissal? Now, you might not have heard Maureen Martin is suing her former employer's L&Q Housing Association, claiming unfair dismissal. She's a candidate for the South London mayor and was allegedly fired for, quote, discriminatory views expressed in an election pamphlet. Nick, you've been reading and talking a lot about this. I know this is
I looked into
exercised you a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, it annoyed me because this is someone who... Look, she said that marriage was between a man and a woman and was like the fundamental building block of society or something like this, and she lost her job with the Lewisham Council because she was running as mayor. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, for one, why is she losing her job for that when it's in another capacity that she's commenting? But mainly, what a bizarre thing to lose your job for. It would be wrong if it was Scientology. If it was because we believe here in this country you have the right to follow your own religion. Yeah. So it would be wrong if it was something like that, but it would be relatively minor. But for me, what's shocking is that she's talking about views that we all used to share. Marriage is the building block of society. I think that's an incredibly normal view. And known liberals were saying that up until 10 years ago. Barack Obama was saying it. He was opposed to gay marriage. I mean, none of us here are married. I mean, obviously Andrew's not. Not obviously, because you could now. And, and Lewis is, and you know, God help the woman that marries Lewis. But the point is,
he has been married though.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
God help him.
Look, and I've tried. I got engaged, but you know, we've all tried. The point is, even if I was gay, right, I think I'd be saying, OK, not for me, but go for it, you guys. I'm rooting for you. You know, thank you for your service. Because it's the building block of society. It's the family, and ultimately, it's been shown that monogamy actually creates a more stable and even a more productive society.
Well, lots of gay rights activists, including Stonewall, as it happens, back in the day, were against gay marriage.
Oh, really?
And one of the reasons they were against gay marriage is because it was seen as heteronormative. It was seen as part of the establishment, and that gay people often didn't want... I know lots of gay people who aren't interested. But although I think it's a no, but I think it should be... If it's a civil ceremony, if it's offered by the government, it should be open to all citizens. If it's a religious ceremony, then no.
But what's so shocking is, while this is surely the norm, marriage, you know, it doesn't get much more normal than that. Not only is it now not the norm, it's the point you can get sacked for it.
Well, that's weird,
how far we've come.
Why do you think she was sacked there? Do you think that's fair?
Because Lewisham is an evil council.
Is it?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I'm from Southwark, and the two of them are best buddies in terms of evilness, Southwark.
Really?
So whenever you, I hate to say it, whenever you hear of something happening...
It's a weird one. I mean, I just think, like, it's an opinion. It's based on religious conviction.
Yeah.
It's not hurting anyone. It doesn't hurt gay people if someone else doesn't.
But how can someone be sacked from this
bizarre,
position?
it's bizarre.
I mean, that's why this country is so messed up. Is the electoral process is like, how can you, for an opinion? If the people want you, they should vote for you, and if they vote for you,
Yeah, and more than that, I just think it's very patronising to gay people. The idea that we can't hear people say they don't approve of marriage without having a meltdown. It's nonsense. Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by author Simon Edge to discuss his satirical novel, The End of the World is Flat, among other topics. See you then.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. About 5 years ago, a school teacher friend of mine was getting worried because anti-gay slurs were becoming common again among the pupils. He sought advice from Stonewall, the country's leading gay rights charity, who'd been so instrumental in the many advances in gay equality over the years. Stonewall sent him some resources. They were mostly posters and flyers, but none of them were about homophobic language or gay rights. Instead, they were all about gender identity and how some people like to be referred to with they, them pronouns. And this wasn't what he'd asked for, and it wasn't helpful, especially since my friend was an English teacher, so it would be sending mixed messages if he was telling pupils to use they and them as singular, while at the same time insisting on strict grammatical standards. What most of us didn't realise at that time was that Stonewall had suddenly pivoted into new ideological terrain. Up until 2015, it was committed to the rights of lesbians, gay men and bisexuals, but having won all its major battles, and with gay equality under the law now secured, it decided to prioritise gender identity as its new cause. Not that there's anything wrong with groups lobbying on behalf of trans people or providing support for those who are affected by anti-trans discrimination, but sexual orientation has nothing to do with gender identity. So this was a completely different direction for Stonewall. All of a sudden, LGB became LGBT. But few stopped to ask why two very different causes should be yoked together in this way. Some people have argued that, having achieved all its goals, Stonewall was suffering a crisis of purpose and needed to find a new cause in order to justify all the money it receives. I don't claim to know the reasons. It would be nice to ask a representative from Stonewall to explain, but they never agree to appear for interviews. And there are plenty of good reasons why Stonewall should engage in discussion. Because at the moment, many lesbian, gay and bisexual people take the view that Stonewall no longer works in their interests. Many believe the charity actively works against gay people and is one of the biggest threats to gay rights we currently face. But why? Well, this is quite complicated because Stonewall, like many activist groups, presents its regressive ideas as progressive, and so people are naturally confused. With that in mind, it's worth going through this point by point. So let's start with children. Gender non-conformity in childhood is a very reliable predictor of homosexuality in later life. It's not an exact science, but a majority of very young people who don't conform to gender stereotypes end up being gay. But Stonewall is advancing an ideology that says that if a young child is gender non-conforming, they might be in the wrong body. So here's a tweet that Stonewall posted just 2 days ago. Research suggests that children as young as 2 recognise their trans identity, yet many nurseries and schools teach a binary understanding of pre-assigned gender. LGBTQ inclusive and affirming education is crucial for the well-being of all young people. But children, of course, don't have any concept of a gender identity. Most adults don't, for that matter. Surely, when a little boy prefers to play with dolls or a little girl prefers blue to pink, the best response is to let them get on with it. The alternative is to fix them according to gender stereotypes. Now, this can happen in one of 2 ways. The first way looks something like this.
The second you see your son dropping the limp wrist, you walk over there and crack that wrist. Man up. Give him a good punch. Okay? You're not going to act like that. You were made by God to be a male, and you're going to be a male. And when your daughter starts acting too butch, you rein her in. And you say, oh no, sweetheart. You can play sports. Play them to the glory of God. But sometimes you're going to act like a girl and walk like a girl and talk like a girl and smell like a girl. And that means you're going to be beautiful, you're going to be attractive, you're going to dress yourself up.
So that's one way that adults try to fix gender non-conforming kids. Now here is the other way.
I can't remember the exact moment it switched over, but there was that point where I thought, you know what, this isn't just a phase. This is not a little girl we're looking at here, it's a little boy. He started being unhappy with being dressed as a girl, so he started being unhappy with wearing dresses. Hair clips were a big no-no. Didn't like hair clips, didn't like the pigtails. He was genuinely upset at being dressed as a girl.
Now, I'm not suggesting a moral equivalence here, because clearly the latter example comes from a place of compassion, whereas the former most certainly does not. But the impact is the same. You see a boy being girly, or a girl who's a bit of a tomboy, and instead of letting them be who they want to be who they are, letting them play with whatever toys they like or dress however they like, you see it as a problem to be fixed. So either you clamp down on the behaviour, force the child to behave in a more stereotypical way, or you tell the child it's not in the right body, a path that often leads to puberty blockers and surgery. Both approaches are grounded in a deeply conservative view of gender and rely heavily on gender stereotyping. And Stonewall supports the latter approach. And what does that mean for children who are likely to grow up gay? The writer Simon Edge put it well in a tweet. He posted an image of himself as a little boy, and he wrote, "This is me as a kid. I was studious, bad at any kind of sport, and far from conventionally boyish. I'd have been transed before breakfast if Stonewall had been in charge. anyone now backing Stonewall is pulling up the ladder to stop kids like me growing up as gay men. For shame. Now, I've spoken to numerous gay men and lesbians who feel the same way. They were gender non-conforming children, as was I, and they are certain that in today's climate, they would have been encouraged to transition. None of which is to deny that some people experience gender dysphoria and, in order to be happy, have to undertake procedures to present as the opposite sex. None of which is to suggest that such people don't deserve our support and protection from discrimination and harassment. But pushing through a policy of gender affirmation in infancy, a policy that will disproportionately affect gay people, is not progressive. And, of course, we're seeing the results now. Since 2010, the number of teenage girls referred to the Tavistock Clinic, a paediatric gender clinic run by the NHS, has increased by 5,000%. Teenage girls, as all studies confirm, are particularly susceptible to social contagion, as we've seen before, with eating disorders and self-harming. So these figures should concern us. These aren't people who are old enough to vote or even buy cigarettes, yet we're told that they ought to be able to make life-changing decisions about their own bodies. This is why so many people who were continually affirmed in their belief that they were trans are now in the process of detransitioning. Richie Herron, a gay 35-year-old civil servant from Newcastle, is currently suing the NHS for encouraging him onto a path that ended with the removal of his genitals. And there will be many more of these to come. And one of the main reasons this has all happened so quickly is because of Stonewall. Because Stonewall doesn't just lobby to promote gender identity ideology, it insists that companies and government bodies subscribe to this belief system. They've even been accused of misrepresenting the law in order to coerce companies into doing so. And Stonewall is everywhere. An investigation by the Taxpayers Alliance last year found that a total of 327 public bodies were paying into Stonewall's Diversity Champions scheme. Between 2018 and 2021, Stonewall received over £3 million of taxpayers' money. The Department for Education paid Stonewall £600,000 during a 5-year period from 2016 to 2021. And although Liz Truss, as Equalities Minister in May 2021, urged all government departments to withdraw from Stonewall's employment scheme, many have not done so. The Department for Work and Pensions and the Department for International Trade, the Department for the Environment, the Home Office, the Foreign Office, the Treasury, Revenue and Customs, the House of Lords, the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, the Labour Party, the Green Party, all of these bodies and many more are still signed up to Stonewall. Remember that Stonewall is the group whose CEO, Nancy Kelly, has compared lesbians who don't want to include men in their dating pool to sexual racists and anti-Semites. This is the charity that has redefined the word homosexual on its website and promotional materials to mean same-gender attracted, even though gay people are same-sex attracted. And a recognition of the biological reality of sex differences has always been at the heart of the gay rights movement. With friends like these, who needs homophobes? So, Simon Edge is an author and journalist, and his 5th novel, The End of the World is Flat, has been described as a brilliant spoof on the absurdity of the postmodern, Twitter-afflicted world, and a bracingly sharp satire on the sleep of reason and the tyranny of twaddle. And I'm delighted to say Simon joins me now. Simon, welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to speak to you today specifically because your book is a satire on Stonewall. I mean, is that fair?
I was coy about it initially, but yeah, it's fair.
OK, I mean, look, why don't you tell us the plot and we can tell you if we think it's obvious or not?
Well, I wanted to examine flat earthery as a kind of, let's get it away from gender, which people find difficult, and there's lots of complicated aspects of it, and it gets quite personal and emotionally charged. Why don't we posit let's say that a benign organisation, a nice charity, a map-making charity, and I had to invent ways that you might have a map-making charity, because there aren't very many of them. But let's say that this charity has done everything it's set out to do and is about to wind itself up when a strange billionaire in California says, hang on, I want you to do something for me. I want you on my side, and I want you to convince the population of the world that the Earth is flat. And I thought that would be, for me partly, as an intellectual exercise, how would you actually go about it?
Yeah, exactly.
And the way my characters do it, they go in, basically, through the crank left through academia, where you can find people who will say anything. You know, this thing you talk about, I think, quite a lot, that you know, queering everything is something that happens in American university departments, and it's basically turning the world on its head to make yourself sound clever and doing it in long words. So, but in my world, I start it. You have to do it in increments. You can't unveil the true crazy until you got to the end. But let's start, for example, by saying that a globular Earth has got two hemispheres. Historically, the North has been in a better position than the South. The South has been impoverished. That's true.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people on woke warriors, culture warriors, very sympathetic to the idea that that this division into hemispheres has been bad for the people of the South. So it doesn't take much to go from there to maybe it's racist to talk about hemispheres. Maybe it's racist to talk about the Earth being globular. And, you know, it's nonsense, but with a bit of help on social media, little by little, you get a kind of cultish movement forming. And in my novel, I've got some airline pilots being sacked for talking about the curvature of the Earth.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is you develop this thing in the novel about the way in which a fantasy can be promoted as reality if people find a way to do so. I mean, one of the characters early on who set up, it's called the Orange Peel Foundation, set up the foundation and is about to wind it down because all of the objectives have been achieved. And then, as you say, the millionaire comes in and says, but I'm going to give you all this money. Are you suggesting, now I don't want to tie it too directly to Stonewall because it's a work of satire, but are you suggesting that at some point with Stonewall that they pivoted into this terrain of gender identity cynically because of money? Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's certainly a possibility, yeah. Because, I mean, what do you do? I think one of the things I wanted to do on a human level, really, was to sort of imagine what it might be like if you were running one of those organisations.
Yes.
So you've been doing something for 20 years, you've got a big team of people, 100 people or something, they're very talented, really bright people. Are you going to just turn them out on the street? It must be very tempting if something else comes along to, well, let's find something new to do.
Well, I mean, one of the things that troubles me about this whole movement and the movement that you are satirising is that it seems to be, it seems to fail to listen to people's legitimate concerns. You tweeted earlier today or yesterday about the fact that as a child you were gender non-conforming and that in the current climate you would have been trans. You would have been told you're in the wrong body. And there's a lot of people in that position.
Thank you for showing that picture, by the way.
Yeah, right. There we go. Well, you put it out there, right? But the point is that, to me, is a legitimate concern. It's not coming from a place of transphobia. It's not coming from a place of hate. It's something that a lot of gay people are concerned about. Why is Stonewall saying no debate? We're not going to listen. And why, moreover, is Stonewall saying anyone who says that is a transphobe and a hate figure? What's going on there?
Well, I think one of the conclusions that we've come to, those of us who talk about this quite a lot, is that they don't like to debate because there isn't very much of an argument on their side. That,
yes.
For example, one of the things that you might say is, well, OK, if somebody... If you can be born in the wrong body, then what is it that is born in the wrong body? Is there some kind of gendered soul?
Yes.
Or is there something in your brain that means that you're destined to find life unlivable unless you can go into the opposite sex? And if there were such things, we would know about them. But no research has come up which suggests that there's anything of the kind.
Well, Stonewall alluded to research showing that 2-year-olds are aware of their trans identity. There isn't that research. That research doesn't exist. And in fact, the research they're alluding to, I presume, is the research that talks about children's burgeoning awareness of sex differences and the way in which boys and girls are socialised differently. Well, that exists. But to make the leap from that to a gender identity is a huge leap. And there is no evidence for that.
None at all. When you say allude to, yeah, exactly. It's kind of...
Well, they won't give the... I mean, people have been saying to Stonewall all day, what's your evidence? What research are you talking about? And they just blank them or block them. That's been happening.
They do shut down. And I think one of the things they also do is they deliberately mystify. They make this look fiendishly complicated. One of the things they've also done is invented a whole bunch of stuff that we never even thought of that are now apparently oppressed. Asexuals, aromantics, blah, blah, blah. I mean, clearly this is widening the pool of the people that you can claim to champion. But the other thing that it does is that if you're in HR or if you're running a big company, you know that this is a minefield.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. You haven't got. I mean, you and I, we intervene in this quite a lot because we are confident in the vocabulary. We're not nervous of talking about it.
Yes.
Most people are because they're terrified of saying the wrong thing or use the wrong word. And so in the corporate setting, well, this is a minefield. What the hell are we going to do? And whatever we do is wrong. I know. Let's call the expert. Who's the expert? Stonewall is.
Well, that's how it works, isn't it? There's a moment in your book where one of the characters goes to an expert in this kind of PR thing. It's in some council estate. I can't remember where exactly it is. And one of the things he says to them is jargon. Use overly long, use casuistry, in other words. Use sophistry. Use language that people can't penetrate to make them think that there's some substance here. And we hear that all the time. That is happening again and again. So then you've taken the satirical approach, but how do normal people who are just going about their everyday lives and they're told, yes, everyone has an innate gender identity, whether you think you do or not, how do you push back against that when it is such a linguistic minefield?
I think we've seen that it's hard, but I think we've also demonstrated, and again, you and I exist in a bit of a Twitter world where we talk about this a lot online, and we have amassed quite a community of people now who are much more knowledgeable about this, who are pushing back, who are really quite organised, and I think it's significant. I think that Stonewall has come out with this really extraordinary tweet today. I I was in the car, so I've had 2 hours actually offline, which is quite good for me.
It's very healthy.
So I haven't checked to see what kind of reactions there have been. But before I got in the car, it was really striking that Stonewall's mates don't seem to have been coming on side.
No, well, this is the tweet we can see here, and it's incredible because they're claiming that that children as young as 2 recognise their trans identity. The feedback on this tweet is quite extraordinary. I mean, they have virtually no support. It's had thousands and thousands of retweets, but pretty much, I'd say all of them, or 99% of them, have been negative.
Are you going to explain what ratio means?
Well, a ratioed tweet is a tweet that gets more comments than retweets, because people are just sort of, pointing out the absurdity of it.
And this is the mother of ratios.
It's a huge ratio, but again, Stonewall just won't engage. I invited Stonewall on tonight because I wanted to ask them these questions. I don't want to do it in a combative way. I don't want to accuse them of anything. I want to ask them to explain their thought process behind this. I want to ask them about the research that they claim to have seen. I want to have the conversation. And they replied, giving me answers which I didn't ask the questions to. They replied, saying, but it's important that young children, gay children, gender non-conforming children are looked after and told that they should be who they are. Well, that's what I think. So obviously there's some sort of disconnect here. And it comes down to this thing of Stonewall having a complete refusal to listen to people, dismissing people in a very infantile way as being homophobic, transphobic, whatever, right? This doesn't get us anywhere. Can you envisage a time where people could get around the table from all sides, they'll say, yes, let's have a discussion? Do you think that's ever going to happen? Because at the moment, I don't see any sign of it.
I think one of the things that has changed, in the last month, we've seen somebody who looked quite likely to become the Prime Minister not become the Prime Minister, Penny Mordaunt, because of this issue. So I think people, certainly in one half of the political world, are waking up to all this, and they're not afraid to ask proper questions about it. So I think by talking about it more, by demystifying it and saying it is okay, if you think this is bonkers, so do most people, do say so, I think that does make a difference. But it's true that one of the difficulties is that Stonewall tells its core constituency, which is young trans people, that everybody wants to kill them, to exterminate them. They use these words.
They use the phrase erase and eradicate.
And genocide. I mean, not Stonewall perhaps necessarily, but the Stonewall's...
Certainly the activists that are sympathetic have used that word genocide.
So if you are a nervous, kind of 17, 18-year-old, and you are worried about this stuff, and it's very, very, sincere for people who think that this may apply to them, then you think that people are out to kill you, and you think that you are in the most at-risk demographic in the world, when actually the reverse is true. You think this because people who are meant to be on your side are telling you so all the time. It's a really, really brutal thing to do with people's mental health.
So then why is it that the government is still funding Stonewall to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds? Why are corporations still paying them all this money to effectively promote something that is very divisive and damaging to the very people it purports to protect?
Well, absolutely. Good question. I think in practical terms, one reason may be that people have the absolute screaming abdabs as soon as any bit of funding is withdrawn or as soon as Stonewall is removed from any organisation. There was a university, though I can't remember which one it was, but students picketing outside the university rejoin Stonewall.
Yes.
And so, it's quite a difficult, argumentative, nasty process when if you bite the bullet and try and get rid of Stonewall. But I think it really does have to happen.
Well, you've gone down the satirical route, and I think it's a very effective piece of work. I really enjoyed it. Can you tell people, just remind people, what is the book called? Where can they get it?
It's called The End of the World is Flat, and you can get it. You can ask for it in any good bookshop, and it's on Amazon. It's everywhere.
Perfect. Well, Simon Edge, thank you very much for joining me today. So after the break on Free Speech Nation, Inaya Folarin Aman will be here to discuss whether the lack of diversity within the England women's football team is of any concern. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my wonderful panel, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. We're going to help to deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So why not drop us an email at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our very best to answer all of your issues. Doesn't matter how personal it is. You can trust me. I'm a fountain of wisdom. The England Lionesses beat Spain to reach the semi-finals of the Women's European Championships football tournament earlier this week. They take on Sweden on Tuesday with a very strong chance of winning the whole tournament. However, there has also been a lot of comment about a lack of diversity within the squad. With me now to discuss this is GB News culture editor Inaya Folarin Aman, everyone. Thank you for joining me, Inaya. So this is an interesting one. Now, I did see some of the backlash. I saw the article in The Guardian, and you were telling me earlier about the response on the BBC. Can you give us some sense of what have the comments been about this team?
Yeah, I think it has been really fascinating. I must admit, I'm not a big sports fan or football fan in particular. But it was striking that when you have the women's sport, particularly football, which has made such significant strides over the last few decades in terms of popularity and attention, these women have worked so hard in order to attain elite level athleticism. Actually, many of the comments that have been related to the victory has not just been celebrating what these women have achieved, but actually commenting about the fact that the team were so-called all white. So a BBC sports journalist, when talking about the victory, said that there was some controversy around the lack of diversity and the fact that the team were all white. And actually also the Guardian article as well by Asante also talked about the fact that this would potentially prevent a lot of young girls in particular from dreaming about doing that particular role as well.
That's what confused me a bit, is that the argument there, because firstly, was there a controversy? I don't think anyone was particularly upset about this. And then this Guardian article saying, the lack of diversity, it means that young girls, black girls will say, well, that football's clearly not for me. I mean, that's a bit patronising, isn't it?
Well, hugely. And I think it is really unfortunate, this idea that seems to have taken hold across all of the media and cultural elites, effectively, or the majority of which, this idea that you can only relate to people that, quote, look like you. When, for example, sports stars, it's their ability, it's their prowess, it's their athleticism, which really marks them out as something significant and worthy of celebration. It's not necessarily their skin colour. So I think that's hugely patronising and condescending, both to a lot of young black girls, but also those women who have worked so hard. I think it's so sad for them to actually, when they've achieved so much, to be told, actually, this is not as great as you think it is because of the colour of your skin.
I mean, I can imagine in a world where, there is no representation at all. If you go back to the 70s, say, or let's say the early 80s on MTV, there were no black artists. All of a sudden you had Billie Jean, Michael Jackson, there's a black artist there, and then it broke the seal, and there were loads of fantastic black artists came on. I can imagine before then that being quite off-putting and people thinking that industry is not for me. But we don't live in that world anymore.
Well, I think it is quite striking, this inability to see how far we've come. And I think if we only look at the men's football team, we can see that Marcus Rashford or Raheem Sterling has fans from all across colours and creeds and cultures, similarly with Harry Kane. And, I wrote in my Spike column about this, that I actually loathe to have to categorise players and fans in this way, well, white players, black supporters, because ultimately we are all enjoying the sport. And it is very sad that even domains like sport, where a lot of people use it as a form of escapism just to enjoy, is now not a place where you will not experience some of this kind of partisan messaging on race, and I think it's very sad.
It's a very strange one, particularly with sport, isn't it? Because you would have thought that when it comes to the selection of a sports team, the only consideration is how good you are at the sport, right?
Well, undoubtedly there are important questions to be raised about accessibility. We know that some sporting facilities are not in particular schools because they may well just be very expensive. And I think more funding and support can be given to make sure that all different kids can be exposed to lots of different sports.
Sure.
And that is, I think, a goal that most people would agree with, and actually combating racial discrimination and racism in all areas of society is something that most British people, I hope, agree with. But it's the way in which all issues are now becoming racialised and seen through the lens of race, to which you cannot even look at a team and enjoy it without somebody trying to find a racial grievance to analyse it through. And I think there's something quite significant that's lost in that.
Isn't that issue that you're alluding to there about, some communities don't have the facilities and they don't, the opportunities are fewer? But isn't that more a class issue than a race issue, if we're going to pin it down to a particular issue?
Yeah, if we are going to do that. But also, you look at cricket and some might say there's an overrepresentation of people from South Asia. And you might say that in some other sports, like sprinting, there may be an overrepresentation of people from Afro-Caribbean heritage. But we wouldn't make those kinds of assumptions that it's due to prejudice or hatred or discrimination. We recognise that there may well be cultural, familial, economic factors at play there. And it's this, all racial disparities equals racism or racial discrimination, or even the notion that something being all white instinctively means a problem that needs to be solved, I think is a problem in itself of racialising all aspects of society.
So can you talk us through what is happening there? I mean, I've seen articles, there was that article on the BBC about how the countryside is racist. It's not, that the outdoors are not accessible to black people, and I'm thinking, black people can walk outside, can't they? I mean, it does feel like everything is interpreted as being a structural issue. So there's an all-white women's football team, therefore it must be due to racism. Why can't these activists think, well, maybe it's a possibility that there's a racist who's been appointing the members of that football team? Slim possibility, I should imagine. Why can't it cross their mind that there might be other factors here?
Well, this is the thing. Like, I tend to say to these people, I'm not sure people are thinking about you that much. When you go into the countryside, that they're preoccupied with all the different skin colours that people are in that particular room or that particular area. And not only that, I think people that come from perhaps a more optimistic outlook, myself and others, are treated with suspicion in some way. If you don't think that Britain is systemically racist, or that, of course, racism still persists, but actually it is much better than what it was in previous generations, and we were until very recently on a very positive trajectory, that's seen as something to be sceptical of, or that you have ulterior motives. And I think it's that does a lot of damage to ethnic minority people, this narrative that if you access a particular institution, go into a particular space, that you have to perhaps even have a kind of chip on your shoulder because you might be worried that you're going to experience prejudice. I think it's that narrative that corrodes the relationship between different groups of people, makes us more suspicious, and ultimately, I think, undermines the goal of attaining a colourblind society, to which we all, up until very recently, thought was a good thing. But increasingly, it's being delegitimised as ignoring or denying racism. And I think all we are seeing is actually, I think, racial lenses being more and more at the forefront of how people view the world. And I don't think that could be good for achieving a more equal society.
Do you take on board the view that, in football, there have definitely been incidents of racism, and you've heard from certain fans, and I'm not saying most fans, but a few fans, shouting racial abuse at people. And this has happened, hasn't it? So maybe there's a hypersensitivity within this particular area?
Yeah, I think that there has been campaigns that have been hugely successful, like Kick It Out. And of course, racism is still a problem within some aspects of sport, but there's also, I think, a problem in exaggerating or talking it up. So when we look at the Three Lions game that was last year, that these players lost their penalties, and the whole discussion ended up being about racist abuse online. And undoubtedly that's wrong, and most people condemned it. I think the entire media covered it front to back. But actually, when we did look at that further, a lot of the racist abuse came from foreign bot accounts from other countries, and oftentimes a small number of people. And whilst that is still wrong, I still think that we have to have some perspective. It serves no one, and it doesn't help the cause of racism to create a kind of culture of fear around racism, a kind of moral panic where people really feel that racism is going to be something they experience in all aspects of their life. And that is not necessarily true. We undoubtedly have a long way to go, but we've come very far, and I think we are in danger of doing back a lot of that good work if we just see things through the lens of race in all aspects of our lives.
And I thank you very much for joining me today. Coming up on Free Speech Nation, we'll have more questions from our beautiful audience. We're going to have an interview as well with the musician Todd Sharpville, and also this week's social sensations. Please don't go away. See you after the break.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking quite unsettled due to low pressure, meaning it's blustery and showery for many. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in Scotland, and here the showery rain will be heavy at times and perhaps thundery too. Whilst the winds will be a little lighter today, it will still be windy. It will be a blustery and showery start for Northern Ireland too. There will be quite a bit of cloud around, meaning sunshine will be limited. Some heavy and perhaps thundery rain for parts of northwest England at first too, but it will turn drier as we head through the morning. Some showery rain for North Wales and around Merseyside. Some heavy bursts are likely, and it will still be blustery, especially towards the coast and around Snowdonia. It should turn calmer through the morning. Further east around Peterborough and the East Midlands, it should be a drier start to the day with a greater chance of seeing some sunshine. It will be more sheltered here too, so less windy. Similar for East Anglia, where Monday is looking mostly fine, although it won't be as hot as today. The odd passing burst of rain isn't out of the question. While southwestern England will have some showery rain through the morning, more central and eastern parts of southern England should be drier, with only a few showers to watch out for. Through the rest of the morning, it will be plenty of showers, especially in the north and northeast, where they could be thundery. And that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle, and of course my wonderful guests, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. So let's get some more questions from our audience. Tonight, let's get a question from Wanda. Wanda, hello.
Do strip clubs disempower women?
Do strip clubs disempower women? Now, this is a really interesting story which broke this week. Around 100 dancers in Edinburgh have been left facing unemployment after the council used new powers to shut down all 4 strip clubs in the Scottish capital. And in protest, the United Sex Workers Organisation has raised £20,000 to fight the decision under equality laws. But Mandy Watt, deputy leader of the Labour-run Council of Edinburgh Council, says the adult venues can remain open so long as the women dance with their clothes on. So she said, this is a quote, she said, "I understand concerns about people losing jobs, but the venues could apply to stay open. All they need to do is not insist on women dancing naked. They don't need to do that to operate." But if they do that, it's more just, that's artistic appreciation of dance. It's more choreography than stripping, isn't it?
Yes, it's suddenly high art. Yeah, there's another quote from Mandy Watt. She says, "I believe the ban was the right decision because these clubs disempower women. They're not helpful for the view society has of women and their place in the world. I want to see women being treated with respect." So it's quite similar to the darts girls, if you remember that, except they weren't stripping, but they were girls who dressed up nicely near the darts, and they were told by middle-class feminists, you can't do that, even though they were just using their asset, which was physical beauty, to make a living, which I thought was probably fine. My problem with this is, it's middle-class feminists telling women how to behave. I would be fine with it if it was done from a Christian perspective, in a Christian culture, in my Christian theocracy that we're going to have. But my problem with it, you see, is that it's coming from leftists without a coherent moral philosophy. Thus, you get the absurdity of, we'll let the women dance, but they can wear their clothes because they don't know what to do. They don't know what their moral philosophy is. It's middle-class feminists saying, you can't do that, we don't like it, but we don't really understand why.
But the thing is, it's not sex work, is it? I mean, the whole thing about prostitution and sex work, that's a different argument, and there's a very complicated, loads of different views on that, and I think that's a more complicated issue. But this is dancing, but the women are choosing to do a job where they get naked, right?
No, and in this society, in this fallen culture that we have, I say they should be allowed to do it because the reasons that they're being banned are completely pointless and stupid.
What about freedom of choice?
Well, yeah, in an actual... I'm saying if it was done from sort of... If we were in a sort of moral society that did it based on that, but what we are is in a completely degraded society that's doing it purely to stop them making a living. So I disagree with it. But you're saying it's not sex work. It's interesting. Someone who was criticising Mandy Watt said that she called them the SWERFs, the sex worker exclusionary radical feminists.
Yes, I've heard
There's
that.
now SWERFs.
I know, I've heard
that was a
SWERFs.
thing. Okay.
Yes. What do you think about this, Lewis? Do you think dancing naked qualifies as sex work? I mean, there are Chippendales who do this. There are male strippers who dance naked.
I think they brought it on themselves by calling themselves dancers. I mean, they're not really dancers. They're just then. If they call themselves nudists, then the case could be made that you can't.
That's a different thing, though. A nudist is someone who wants to get back to nature.
Well, not necessarily. Can be indoor nudists.
Indoor nudists.
Indoor nudists.
But would you dance naked for money? I'm not asking you to do it now, by the way.
Yeah. I would be honoured if someone asked me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a difficult... I mean, the kind of more... the liberal person in me says people should be able to decide what they do with their own bodies and what they do.
I was surprised that Labour has any seats in Scotland.
It is a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it is. I mean,
Were
they were
you
completely...
surprised at that?
Yeah, in fact, I thought Edinburgh was SNP for some reason.
Yeah.
Can I just say, don't you have this book about the new Puritans? I mean, this is where leftism comes full circle and becomes Puritanism.
Yeah.
That's what's fascinating about it. But like I say, but without the cultural heritage, without the melioristic element of Christianity. So it's just a kind of incoherent Puritanism.
What word did you use?
I said melioristic.
I said melioristic, meaning a tendency to improve. Humans can improve the world.
To ameliorate is to
No, melior with an M.
No, but,
melioristic.
Yes, but to ameliorate is the verb.
Oh, OK. Sorry. And just got schooled by Dr. Doyle.
That's me.
The point is, I'm saying that. The point is...
Isn't he a fancy one?
The point is...
When you use a word that a Jew doesn't know...
The point...
we do understand.
You got the point.
Yeah.
The point is that the left it's the left acting puritanically, but they end up with this bizarre confusion of, well, you can dance but with your clothes on, because they don't have any real moral basis. They're just in a weird...
Have they talked to the women? I mean, I would like to hear from the women on this and what their views... I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people are upset about losing their jobs, aren't they?
I think it's that same thing, that same subject before about getting upset that someone's got a nice tan. They're just jealous that somebody has a nice body, and you know what?
I think I'd like to talk to one of the women who's lost a job, and also one of the women who oppose it. I'm going to see if I can arrange that for next week. I think that would be a really interesting discussion, because I think actually hearing from the people involved rather than Lewis and Nick...
I thought my point was brilliant.
Your point was brilliant, but your level of personal expertise on this is limited.
Yeah, but you're buying into the leftist lived experience.
No, actually, I'm not.
I can comment on this.
No, because I've never said that someone's personal experience of a thing isn't valuable. It is valuable.
You just said it now.
What I would say... No. What I'm saying is that your opinion isn't invalidated by your lack of experience. But by
it's
the
not
same...
good.
But I'm saying... Well, I would suggest that a stripper knows more about stripping than Nick Dixon.
Well... just to conclude my point is, in my Christian theocracy, this would still be banned, but for much better reasons.
OK.
Which is that it's licentious and slatternly behaviour.
There we go. I knew he was going to get to that eventually. Lewis, final word. I've got to move on.
Aren't Scottish people Calvinists?
Yeah, no,
yes.
And isn't Calvinism the concept that you're upset that somewhere someone is having a good time?
That's not at all.
Is that true?
No, that's H.L. Mencken's characterisation of Puritanism, which is, of course...
Close enough.
Yeah.
To do with predetermination.
Anyway, let's move on to our next question now, which is from our Twitter account. Thanks for tweeting in, Lisa. And Lisa says the following. Should the Brighton peer-to-peer race have a non-binary category? I thought one of the Brighton peers burnt down. Anyway... Maybe they built another one. I haven't been to Brighton for a long time. A non-binary category for swimmers has been included for the first time in the peer-to-peer race held in Brighton. More than 300 swimmers between the ages of 14 and 70 took on the 1 kilometre swim from the city's derelict West Pier to the iconic Palace Pier. And around 120 of these were in the competitive race. 3 were in the non-binary category. The thing about a non-binary category, because non-binary is an identity rather than something rooted in biology, doesn't that just mean that the male non-binary people will win?
Good point. I mean, ostensibly, there's nothing wrong with having a third category. But I've done my homework again. I've got some quotes for you, Andrew. Lynette Slight, the race organiser, who is slightly stupid, said, "We've been talking about becoming more inclusive with the LGBTQ community and anyone else that doesn't swim the sea. I didn't know LGBTQ people were exclusively land-dwelling creatures.
No.
They can't go in the sea.
No, we're amphibious.
Ah, OK.
Yeah.
And she goes on, and you're thinking, OK, well, maybe a non-binary race. She loses me here. She says, it's a very white, middle-class sport, which is bad, of course. It's very important to me to make sure that everyone has access to the sea safely and can enjoy it and get excited about events like this. Basically, the sea is heteronormative and white supremacist, so we need to fix the sea.
I'm not very good at swimming. Shouldn't there be a category for people who are bad at swimming?
Well, they've got whitefish. I guess they're the ones who are good at swimming.
Yes.
Look, it's not really about race, though. This is about, because sport is divided into categories of sex, because men are stronger, swim faster than women.
Possibly.
So if you have a non-binary category, I mean, fine, it doesn't bother me at all if you want to do that, but surely the ones who have the physical advantages are going to win within that category, and those will be the ones who were born male, right?
But I think the more categories you have, the more chance more people have to win, and then they go home and tell their friends that they won, and then the thing becomes more popular.
Yeah, surely it's not that big a deal. I want a category for me.
No, but surely the idea is you take the non-binary people out of the women's category to allow women to win.
I suppose maybe that's the point. Yeah. So maybe it's a possibility. Who knows? Anyway, our next question is from Trevor. Trevor.
Hello, yeah. How can the ultra-rich be stopped from controlling free speech?
So this is something I've thought a lot about. This is a story that broke this week about courts giving greater powers to throw out legal actions that are deemed to threaten free speech. And these plans were unveiled today. And this is to do with this thing called lawfare. And it happens a lot with Russian oligarchs who, in order to silence their critics, they'll just throw so much money at them and sue them, even when there's no grounds to sue. And they've got the money to do it, because if they lose a few million, so what? They've got billions. So that now there's going to be this crackdown on what they call lawfare, strategic lawsuits to shut people down. Now, when it comes to libel, for instance, I've talked about this a lot. I mean, I think we do need libel laws. I think if, for instance, I spread a lie about you which ruins your career and costs you thousands of pounds in income, you should be able to take me to court for that if I've said something that is knowingly untrue about you. And I don't think that's a free speech issue. I think that's an incident where you're using speech as the means to commit a crime, such as blackmail, espionage, perjury, that kind of thing, right? People often get that confused. And I think, but I think if we do have libel laws, they have to be tight, and they can't just be manipulated and exploited by the powerful to prevent people criticising them. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And this is a good move, because what it seems to be is the legal system takes so long, doesn't it? And what they're basically doing, they hit people with enough money that they just tie them up with legal fees. Yeah. They make the whole process really slow. I mean, I thought that's basically how America worked. But the good thing about this, they're trying to get rid of that so that people like Lewis won't be able to do that anymore. And he won't be able to tie up his victims in endless red tape, and the truth will come out.
Right? Have you been suing a lot of people, Lewis?
Just red tape, so I just tie them up with red tape.
That's just more to do with his personal taste, isn't it? We don't want to get into your private...
No, I think this is a very complicated issue.
It is, yes.
And it's something that sounds very simply, we'll just stop the Russian people... Russian oligarchs.
Well, it's not just Russian oligarchs.
I know it isn't. It involves everybody. Everybody should have a right to their day in court. And what this is saying you can go to a judge and say, you know what, we don't think your case has merit, and we're not going to let a jury decide. And if that were the case, then Johnny Depp wouldn't have.
But that's a different. I mean, you're dealing there with Johnny Depp and people who are very, very rich. What if, say, you were sued by a multi-billionaire? Right, and you can't afford the legal fees. I mean, they go into sort of hundreds of thousands of pounds. You would just be shut up, wouldn't you? You'd be silenced.
Not necessarily. Why do you have to match dollar for dollar on a legal case?
But that's just the reality of it.
And you know what? It's always been this way. That's why this thing is... I'm totally against... And you have the number one guy who works for this company, which is Mark Stein, who's Mr. Anti-Slap, whatever it is, or pro-slap. I can't even tell which one it is.
You say the number one guy?
The number one...
Andrew's sitting right here.
No, he's not saying the number one guy on the channel. He's saying the number one guy who feels this way about...
I zoned out.
So if you want...
You weren't listening to Lewis. What a surprise.
Well,
Mark Stein, who's absolutely brilliant.
He is good.
Right? He is absolutely brilliant. And he's been fighting a case over climate change. And they've tried to use, I believe, the anti-slap laws against him.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? Like, some people will have legitimate grievances. Some people will be libelled, and yes, you're right, they do deserve their day in court. If someone's lying about you, if someone's, and they're trying to damage your livelihood, that's my point. I think you should be able to take action. But what if there are these incidents where just powerful people want to sue people into silence? That is a problem, surely.
Well, you're talking like that's something that hasn't been done since time.
No, I think it has been happening, but I think we need to address it.
There's no way to address it.
Or maybe there isn't.
What you do is you go into court and you say, I'm a poor man and I'm fighting this big company, and people might have sympathy on you way more than they would against McDonald's. It's
you never know. Well, look at Erin Brockovich did it, took on the Giants. Anyway, another question now. This is from Sarah. Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Is it a crime to air an offensive view?
Right. So police officers have been told that they should no longer investigate people who say offensive things online spats. Now, this is actually to do with new guidance that's been issued by the College of Policing. Now, the reason... I just want to clarify this because I think there's a lot of confusion about this. A lot of the articles are saying this is a great victory for free speech. Suddenly, you know, we're not going to have police investigating nasty tweets and that kind of nonsense, OK? Now, the only reason the College of Policing have done this is because the reporting of non-crime hate incidents was determined to be unlawful by the Court of Appeal in the case of Harry Miller, and we've covered that story many times on this programme. The Home Office has said to the College of Policing, you need to stop recording non-crime because the police have no business investigating non-crime. They're there for crime. And the College of Policing went away saying, yeah, OK, it's unlawful, so we'll just change our guidelines a little bit. And what they've done in the new guidelines, which I've looked at, is basically they've fudged it. And it's interesting because a lot of the media reports on this have been, oh, this is great, so now the police are going to stop recording non-crime. No, they're not. They're not, because the College of Policing are absolutely not backing down. They're just changing their wording a little bit because they're so ideologically captured.
Is that right?
That is right, yeah.
So I was wrongly optimistic about this because the wording had changed here. It says that the updated guidance makes clear that incidents must not be recorded when they are trivial or irrational. The perception of the complainant is no longer enough.
Yes.
So that's the key part, that we'd had this absurd abandoning of objective truth in favour of the perception of the claimant.
That's true.
So hopefully it'll be better. I mean...
Well, they're saying it should be a bit more stringent on that regard, but there's another part of the document that still preserves that idea.
Yeah, and Harry Miller himself was worried about that, saying there's still... And he's also said there's separate rules governed by another body that will allow incidents to be recorded based on victims' perception. So it's a step. It's not the whole thing. It's like a step.
It's a problem, and it happens again and again when the High Courts say you've got to do something. These quangos, like the College of Policing, who are so captured by this ideology, they just won't do it.
Did you hear what the constable said to Harry Miller? I've brought the quote for you guys. He said, so Harry Miller had a chief constable say to him, common sense is not an appropriate tool for a police officer because it leads to unpredictable outcomes. How mad is that?
Wow.
And he said, what we need is more guidance. Because that's never gone wrong historically, is it?
No,
People just ignoring common sense and following guidance.
I mean, non-crime, honestly, Lewis, non-crime hate incidents. That's a problem, isn't it?
Well, you can't take away... It's like taking away a policeman's gun. Once they have a gun, they want to keep the gun. And I think this is one more tool that police have to cudgel. Cudgel, that's a weapon, but
your point is right. Is that once people have these powers that they ought not to have,
right? And
surrendering them. It's like the government. If you give the government powers to exercise restrictions on free speech, getting those powers back is impossible.
Is impossible. And the number one person who's brought this subject up is working for this station, and that's you.
It is me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm nervously suspecting an insult is about to... Because there's no way that you would just do a compliment like that.
That's the problem with gay people. That's where you feel like he's going.
That's where he's going. That's where he's going.
I'm with you 100%.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. We are going on to take... Sorry, I didn't mean to silence you there. It's quite hypocritical. We're going to take another question now. This is from our email account. So this one came in from Samantha. Samantha says, is it worse for climate protesters to glue themselves to masterpieces than to block motorways? So... I mean, this is incredible. There was footage that was circulating online. These activists at the Uffizi Gallery, there they are. This is the Uffizi Gallery in Firenze. And they have glued their hands to the Primavera, Botticelli's Primavera. And now, luckily, there is glass. And the glass on the Primavera was only installed a few years ago. So thank God the Uffizi did that. And here, they're going to get dragged away in a minute, and you'll be able to see they basically pull their hands off the painting. But I do worry about this. I mean, now, there was no damage caused to Botticelli's work there, but I see this as utter philistinism. And how long... I mean, a lot of those paintings in the Uffizi don't have protective glass. How long before some of these idiots cause actual damage to an incredible masterpiece, the kind of thing that they could never hope to produce because they're such mediocrities? How dare they?
Say what you really think, Andrew. I know, well, that's the irony, that they pretend to care about the world and stuff, but they don't care about our heritage because they're prepared to vandalise art for their own narcissism. And what is ironic is that a lot of them actually are art students. In the UK, some of the people doing this were art students. So this becomes...
Really?
Yeah, one of them was an art student who'd done one of these things.
Why is Botticelli responsible for climate change?
Well, it becomes a kind of performance art in itself, is the irony. These people are performing. But the scary thing is they also believe it, a lot of them. They believe they're doing something for climate change. Well, they seem to, because they're quite young in most cases. And obviously, as you know, Andrew, the brain doesn't even fully develop till you're 25.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex doesn't even fully develop.
So what are you saying, we should keep all under 25-year-olds indoors?
Correct, and they shouldn't vote.
Interesting. What do you think, Lewis? Do you think the vandalism of a work of art is in any circumstances acceptable?
All
right, there's Lewis Schaefer committing, as ever, to one side of the argument.
I don't. You know what? I mean, I was in 2 museums with my kids. We were just in New York.
You were in the Guggenheim?
I was not in the Guggenheim. We went to the Metropolitan and we went to the Brooklyn Museum. And a lot of the paintings, like I say, they don't have the protection. And you think some crazy nutter can go in there and just do incredible damage. I think it's our own fault by taking this climate change stuff seriously.
Really?
Really. And actually, so people go, well, it is a good cause. It's not a good cause. There's no such thing as...
But I think the activists are alienating a lot of people when they do this sort of stuff, you know?
I think they don't.
Really?
No, because people believe in climate change. They just think, well, that's the wrong approach to do it. No one's going, climate change is ridiculous because these guys are horrible people.
I think they need to up their security at the
Am I
art
allowed
galleries.
to say that?
You can say whatever you want.
Am I allowed to say this?
Well, that's the part you're worried about, Lewis.
Yeah. Some of the stuff you were saying earlier is much worse. Anyway, we're going to move on now. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by musician Todd Sharpville. He's here to talk about his career, his lockdown concerts, and his latest release. See you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Todd Sharpville is a musician with a long and successful career, having released his first album, which won the Best Album honour at the British Blues Awards back in 1992. Todd and his band, The Sharpville Show, isolated together in a Norfolk country house during the first COVID lockdown and streamed live music 3 times a week to the fans across the globe. Also, during the COVID crisis, Todd recorded a duet of his song Love Knows No Bounds with pop legend Robbie Williams. Here's a clip from one of his new songs, Brothers from Another Mother, a collaboration with his friend Larry McRae.
We're brothers from another mother. We bleed with the same color. Blues hounds, chained and tethered, howling at the moon together.
And Todd's new album is this one, Medication Time. This is out this week, and I'm delighted to say Todd joins me now. Thanks. Welcome to the show. So, do you want to tell me a bit about this new album, Medication Time? And it's quite a striking front cover. You in a padded cell.
Yep.
With your guitar, though.
With my guitar. It was. I found myself 16 years after the event. writing a song about an experience 16 years ago when I had a breakdown.
Right.
On the back of a bad divorce, and it was the father's rights side of the thing that took me by surprise. And I spent almost a couple of months in a mental hospital in West Wales on the back of it, which was a defining point for me in my life, and it was something that ended up being a very positive experience, weirdly, in the long term. The way that we pick up the pieces and walk down another path when things go wrong. And I wouldn't have actually changed it for the world. But, so yeah, I then found around this song that I was writing a song describing the experience and embarked on the journey of doing a whole album that was kind of dedicated to what led me into that vulnerable position.
I mean, it's an interesting approach, isn't it, to difficulties. I mean, looking at the album front cover, there might be people who see that and see that's a bit flippant. You're in a straitjacket, it looks a bit whimsical almost, but you're dealing with very serious issues there.
Yeah. And a lot of reviewers are noting at the moment that the album's actually a lot more chirpy and upbeat than they would assume it would be.
They were
when
expecting
dealing with
sort of Nick Cave, dour kind of...
Yeah, well, and there's a bit of that on there. Yeah. But, dark humour is I come from a military family of old, and it's sort of, dark humour is what gets you through the rough stuff.
And do you think this is a common thing among musicians, is to take those terrible experiences and just drive them into something else? I mean, is that in itself a kind of therapeutic thing to do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it should be cathartic if you're being genuine, and if it's soulful and honest, then it's genuine.
Yeah.
And the best stuff comes, is heart on sleeve, and we shouldn't be ashamed of who we are and what we've been through, and expressing it in a way where, we're doing the job of an artist of reflecting society back at itself.
Do you want to tell us how you got into this world? I mean, you come from, a virtually aristocratic background, don't you?
I do, yeah.
And that's quite an interesting... People don't expect you to go from that to blues for some reason.
Yeah, although I heard a Freddie King record when I was 12 years old, and suddenly I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to play like that. And, yeah.
And how did the family react to that? Because that was
shocked and horrified. my dad, had a valid chip on his shoulder of being the only member of the family that hadn't been educated. It was my grandfather, blew, over 1,000 years of history and wealth and privilege on sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the equivalent of whatever sex, drugs, and rock and roll was back in that day. Yeah. So, like the vast majority of Britain's aristocracy, which is an unknown point these days, especially the way that modern culture likes to still play the game of divide, is that most of us are nouveau poor.
Right.
Most of the money was in farming. Farming died a death generations ago.
Yes.
So every penny I've ever made, I've made out of music.
And did you just start on a circuit? I mean, I'm very naive about
pretty much, yeah. Bar scene, and then in my early 20s, I put out an album in my early 20s, and found myself putting backing bands together and backing up black American musicians who were over in Europe.
Yes.
Who needed a decent backing band, and agencies were generally quite callous and overly spendthrifty.
Right.
And it was a cheaper way of doing it. So I worked with Ike Turner and when he got out of jail, and the Howling Wolf's old guitarist, Hubert Sumlin, and many of the heroes that I grew up listening to as a kid.
I mean, that must have been incredible to actually meet the people that had inspired you.
Absolutely, 100%. And it still happens. It's it still happens over the course of my life, and it's always a lovely surprise, and it kind of validates all of the aggro one goes through to be an artist and try and survive.
We might have another clip from Todd. This is Walk Out in the Rain. I believe we've got a clip from this.
Just walk out in the rain. Walk out with your dreams. Walk out of my life. If you don't feel right, darling, catch the next train. Darling, walk out in the rain.
During lockdown, I mean, this must have put an end to all of your performances, but you found a way around it, didn't you?
I was overwhelmed. I'd been going through a treading water, slightly lazy period in the run-up to all of this. So when everyone else took it as an opportunity almost to have a break, I felt like I ought to kick into action and be diligent. And I was horrified at the premise that live ensemble music was about to vanish completely.
Yeah.
And I wanted to offer the music industry behind the scenes the ability to know that there was a band where everyone had individual experience of working with big names and multi-genres available under one roof for their needs. And there are still a host of genres of music that require the nuance of a rhythm section in one room rather than this remote recording thing that works in other capacities. So I, a bit like the Blues Brothers movie, had to put together a band and spoke to just about every musician with form in the UK. And then realised I was going to need to convince someone to move in with me for an unspecified period of time during the very beginning of the pandemic when everyone was terrified.
And these weren't necessarily people you knew well?
No, not at all. Jules Holland's bassist, Dave Swift, who I'd depped in my band a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it was sort of I knew that I was going to have to ask them and their wives and kids and dogs so I needed somewhere big enough to house the project.
So you had this country house, right?
So I negotiated a nominal rent with a mansion in Norfolk that was big enough to accommodate. And then I had to find a way of capitalising it and getting work on board. And, so the rest of the band spent much time in jacuzzis drinking prosecco, enjoying the sunshine.
Of course.
But I could have been in a hovel anywhere. I was sleeping 2 hours a night, having to do all the work.
Were you? I mean, you were doing concerts presumably over the internet.
Yeah.
Were you also creating? Were you writing new work?
Well, yeah. That and suddenly found myself being a PR man, having to handle the PR side of it and the technical side of it because we just arrived in cars with basic backline and instruments and needed equipment. There was every aspect of just making the thing work, and we spent 6 months basically living in 2 mansions in a row.
Amazing.
Doing whatever work I could hustle at the time.
But that sounds great. I mean, so many people had these grand ambitions for the lockdown, but they ended up just watching Netflix.
Sure.
But you actually did something.
Pulled a band together, lived in a mansion, did a duet with Robbie Williams.
I mean, that's not bad. It's not bad going. And do you have plans to tour with this album, this new album?
I do, although this year, I mean, much of the touring schedule for most promoters is last year's schedule that's been moved because of the cancellations last year because of COVID. So this is very much really sort of more doing what I'm doing here, speaking to you about it and seeing what comes on the...
Yeah. Well, I know artists have been so frustrated. I mean, I spoke to Carol Decker from Chappelle about, her frustration about not being able to perform. And it feels like, when you're an artist, when you're a creative, when you're a musician, that without that live performance, without that interaction, so a lot of artists feel completely empty.
There's a lot of audience members. I mean, something that compelled me through the front end of all of this is I've always remembered the people out on the road who, there's a small percentage who don't have wives and kids, who don't have much of a friend circle, and some of them are slightly on the spectrum. So the way of communing with the rest of society, live music and the spontaneity of musicians gelling together and jamming is what does it. So the evening schedule every night is normally going to gigs of different kinds. And I knew that there would be a mental health crisis amongst them, specifically, if all of this was going to suddenly stop in the midst of panic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the cover situation with the album, I experienced a cancellation of sorts. And this is how cancel culture is so insidious and it's so subtle. A very big-time publicist in the US. He's one of maybe the 5 who can get a total unknown on Jimmy Fallon or Kimmel. I was very excited when he took the job on because these people take only literally 1% of what they get offered. And he took vicarious offence over what you said yourself at the beginning. It looks a little bit flippant,
Right.
But it was my experience.
Wouldn't that have changed his view on that? That you'd actually been through this.
Exactly. Well, that's what one would hope. It was, but vicarious offence is a very strange commodity, and it's very unfathomable in so many senses. He said it was a joke at best and a front at worst.
Wow, how grand! I mean, but surely as a creative, you have to be able to express yourself how you perceive.
I asked him. I said, "What was the problem with it?" He said, "Well, you seem to have a little smirk. You seem to look like you're smirking a little bit on the cover." And I said, "Well, dark humour is kind of what got me through it." I said, "If it had been a Tom Waits record, would you have felt the same?" "Oh no. Tom Waits has been around a long time. We're all familiar with the way he."
Oh, I see. So it's because he doesn't know you well enough.
Because,
it's an odd one because in other industries the cancellation element is more front and centre and obvious. In the comedy industry, there are people saying that joke is unacceptable. We need to call the police about that joke. In music, maybe not so much. Or
in most other jobs, it's a much more subtle, insidious thing. I've experienced. I mean, we were talking about my posh roots. People assume that you're the stereotype that they want to berate.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a possibility there might be privilege attached. So the assumption that I'm a trust fund baby or something, and that, I'm not just another grassroots musician beating it out, trying to make a living on the circuit internationally, which I've done for 33 years. That kicks in, and there are lots of gigs, tours, promoters, magazine editors, people who have decided to make me an enemy because they want to, because I represent something to them, which is classic bigotry. It's I can't control who I was born to.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to listen to this. I'm glad that you brought your lovely dog, Genghis, into the studio audience. I think we just about see that on the camera. Does he go to your gigs?
He sits on stage, he'll fall asleep in front of a 412 guitar cab, 100 watts.
That is quite incredible. So just remind us where we can get hold of you or see you online, or Medication Time as well.
I'm everywhere as far as all the general socials go, but I mean, every store at the moment, it's, Amazon, Deezer, Spotify,
all the usual places.
All the normal platforms.
Fantastic. Todd Sharpville, thanks very much for joining me. So we will soon be discussing the grandmother who has overturned a fine which she received for praying during lockdown. And I'm going to be joined by Lois McLatchie from AD International to discuss that story. Please don't go away.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A grandmother from Merseyside has enjoyed a win over police after overturning a fine she received for praying outside during lockdown. Merseyside Police has now apologised to Rosa Layla for the incident in February 2021, when an officer arrested and detained the 76-year-old grandmother and issued her with a fine because she did not have a reasonable excuse to be outdoors at that time. The officer claimed Rosa was there to protest. But this incident has sparked a countrywide look at these types of enforcements of the law, with councils across the UK seeking buffer zones where silent prayer, like Rosa's case, would be prohibited. To talk to me about this is Lois McLatchie, Communications Officer at ADF International, a faith-based legal advocacy organisation which protects fundamental freedoms. Lois, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this particular case? It does sound a bit odd, you know, one person, an elderly woman, alone outside praying. It doesn't strike me as a threat particularly.
Absolutely. Well, prayer is never criminal. Prayer is an internal thought lifted between a person of faith and God. And that's what Rosa was doing. She had taken her daily exercise outside. She had gone to have a walk and to pray at the same time. She had a mask on at the time to comply with any COVID concerns, even though that wasn't even part of the rules at the time. And she was minding her own business. And she was praying about the issue on her heart near an abortion facility. A policeman stopped her and asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm walking and praying." They said, as you said, Andrew, they said that it was not a reasonable excuse and she should be in a church if she was praying, surely. And they did not accept that on a public street anyone can think the thoughts that they want to think. They arrested Rosa, detained her in a police car and fined her £200. And fortunately, with support from ADF UK, she was able to challenge that fine. But we're very concerned about this rolling out across the country.
I mean, this is of great concern. We've heard a number of stories about evangelical preachers on the street being arrested for things like not just public disturbance, but hate speech because they're saying things that are deemed to be homophobic and that kind of thing. But this is even a step further than that, isn't it? Because, you know, I suppose you could make an argument in terms of the public disturbance, although I wouldn't support it. But here it was if it was a protest, a silent protest.
Exactly. We've seen, comedians get into trouble for jokes that they've said, or gender critical feminists sometimes get into trouble for tweets or for things that they've said aloud. And this case goes a step further by policing the silent thoughts of somebody's mind. So for me, it's the biggest violation of freedom of speech, freedom of thought that I've personally seen. We've also seen in the buffer zones that have rolled out already in the UK, down in Ealing and Richmond and up in Fairfield and Manchester, they actually do ban silent prayer outside of abortion facilities. So we see that this is a significant concern for people who are supportive of free speech and fundamental freedoms. And we need to make sure that people have the right to pray, to speak on public streets, and laws don't inhibit that.
So is the concern then, I mean, to take the other side, is the concern that if people are praying outside of abortion clinics and that kind of thing, that could cause distress to the patients, to the people going to those clinics? Is that the idea here?
Yeah, the campaign for buffer zones highlights harassment towards women as a justification for buffer zones. And as a pro-life person myself, I absolutely condemn harassment of any woman in any place. That's obviously wrong and it's illegal. Harassment is already illegal. So whilst these are campaigned for on the basis of harassment, what they actually do is target a much further reach of freedom, and they target anyone who's praying, but also, there's charities out there who offer support to vulnerable women who would like to take it in the event that they would want to keep their child if they only knew about a charity that was able to be there for them. So they actually end up, instead of being a pro-choice thing, they end up being a no-choice thing. They take away choices from women and they take away, fundamental freedoms from people who are out on the public street.
It's interesting because the Conservative Party have pushed through their police crime and sentencing bill, which does threaten to clamp down on protest in very extreme ways. And I find it personally very disturbing because I think peaceful protest is the hallmark of a free society. And I think whether you agree with the protest or not, it should be allowed to go ahead. And some of the things that was included in that bill were things like noise. If a protest was too noisy, the police could shut it down. Well, aren't protests noisy and annoying sometimes?
They are noisy and annoying sometimes, and we also have to make sure we're taking a proportionate response to these things. A lot of the legislation that's coming right now is a sweeping blanket ban on things that are perfectly legal. I remember in that particular bill you referenced, the scope for a protest went down to one person, so one person could be considered to be having a protest. If they're out on the street holding a sign saying "Save the Whales" or something completely innocuous, that could be considered to be an illegal protest, and police under the same measures as 1,000-person protest blocking ambulances, etc. So what's really needed is a proportionate response, and a lot of these legislation coming out of Parliament, but also in local councils that are banning protests are not considering that at all.
Do you think that a lot of this has come around through a culture of offence, insofar as we've prioritised people's feelings so much about whether they find certain points of view offensive, that we've now sought to to criminalise the people who are expressing those views?
Well, Merseyside police who arrested Rosa were the same very police force that last year got in trouble for putting a billboard out that said to be offensive is an offence, which is not true. People in a democratic society, if we hold up freedom of speech, which we must do, then people will find difficulties and disagreements with each other. And that's part of a democracy, is the sharing of ideas and be able to have these conversations and have them in the open. So yeah, I think this culture of taking offence, and then furthermore, the police taking on that culture and becoming agents of cancel culture themselves, that's not their place to be doing it. And thankfully, the Merseyside police recognised that and dropping the charges against Rosa this week. But we need to make sure that that's clear through police training and different mechanisms to make sure that everybody enjoys freedom of speech, no matter who they are.
Do you think, though, that some of the activists calling for these sort of restrictions, do you think it's even crossed their mind that once you set these precedents in law, that one day something that is dear to their hearts will be clamped down? Do you think they ever consider this?
Probably not, because it often just comes targeted at one specific group that they've taken offence at or disagreement to, and this legislation comes as a sledgehammer against all groups of the same viewpoint. So today with Rosa's case, we see it's the pro-life views that are under scrutiny and under stress, but tomorrow, who knows, they can rumble into something else. We see gender critical views be something that's put under pressure these days. And I think these things do spread and spread. So we need to make sure that people understand that everybody has freedom of speech, and having those engaging conversations is actually beneficial for everyone in society.
Lois McLatchy, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
So, time now for some social sensations. This is the part of the show which we dedicate to the world of social media. First up, Boris Johnson got well armed for this video.
Troops who are here being trained by our forces, getting ready to go and fight in Ukraine.
He's been doing this a lot lately. I mean, he was in a fighter jet, wasn't he, the other day, Nick?
He does a lot of that. Well, he's going to need those skills, isn't he, to get back at the Tory party? I mean, it got rid of him in a kind of coup, maybe not a military coup, but it looks like he's ready for the next level.
Well, it feels like a midlife crisis, this kind of thing, doesn't it? A little bit. I mean, what do you think of that? Are you into all this big guns and army boots?
I took my kids in America to shoot guns.
You actually did that?
And I did that. We shot a Magnum and a Glock and an AR something.
And did it make you feel more masculine?
You know something? Bring it on.
So you think maybe with Boris Johnson it's a consolation thing? You know, he's been driven out of his party. He needs to reconnect with his masculine heart.
Happiness is a warm gun.
Yeah.
Maybe he is reconnecting to the Tory party is the party of guns and killing.
I don't think they would suggest that. And we've got a video now in which this child prodigy wows audiences with his amazing skills. Let's have a look. I mean, he looks like Boris, actually.
Yeah, he looks like a young Boris Johnson. But the thing is, that's so impressive. But at my school, I would have been so bullied for that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, he must... I mean, that's impossible. That's sort of like 5 years old doing that.
He's definitely not a Northern Comprehensive School. That's what I'm going to tell you. I got bullied just for doing music GCSE. I mean, if I'd have done that, I'd have been battered every day. But amazing.
I mean, but you're a better person because you can't do it.
Right. I'm very good at guitar.
There is a danger, isn't there, with like young prodigies like this, you know, and they can often be messed up because they're pushed out into the world of showbiz.
That movie Shine, remember?
I didn't see Shine.
Brilliant movie.
Is that what it is? I was thinking more of Drew Barrymore.
Have you seen Lawnmower Man?
I have seen Lawnmower Man.
That's a callback to about 16 episodes ago.
Nick likes to mention this film Lawnmower Man because I saw it 3 times in the cinema, which he thinks is odd. Has one person seen it?
One person.
All right, well, anyway, I do think it's incredible. It does sort of restore my faith in the idea of genius. I think that someone who can do that at such a young age must have something rather special about them, surely.
What, mowing lawns?
We're not talking about the lawnmower. That was something Nick was distracting you with talk of lawnmowers.
Is that what Lawnmower Man was about?
Lawnmower Man was
training from...
No, it was a dystopian film about virtual reality and its effects. And I was interested in it because I was scared about where virtual reality would lead us when I was a kid.
So there was nothing about like a 3-year-old learning how to mow lawns.
Well, it's a Stephen King thing. It's about a sort of person who has learning difficulties who becomes ultra smart.
Yes.
That kid was kind of ultra smart. So there's a connection.
There's a vague connection. But really, there's one scene in the film with a lawnmower. Anyway, we're not talking about that film. Goodness me, Nick, why did you bring that up? Anyway, we're going to watch this one now. This is, finally, Labour showed what the Tory leadership candidates think about their party. Let's have a look at this.
People need help now. We make promises we can't keep.
It's not just wrong, it's dangerous. We cannot make it worse.
If Richie has got this great plan for growth, why haven't we seen it in his last 2.5 years at the Treasury?
I'm finding it very difficult to understand who's disowning and who's defending the record of the last few years that they've been in government.
The worst economic crisis for a generation.
Why should the public trust us? We haven't exactly covered ourselves in glory.
So this was the risk, wasn't it? When we had these televised debates, and of course the candidates are going to start eating at each other and attacking each other, and then Labour, very cleverly, I thought, just took those clips of them saying how terrible everything has been, put it together into a campaign video. I mean, they were always going to do this, weren't they?
Yeah, well, that's like what they do in America, and that's called democracy, and that's why, you know, and it's like, who are these people anyway? No one's elected them. It's like, it reminds me of an old ad in the, an old cartoon that in the old Soviet Union, which showed a store in the Soviet Union which was completely empty of shelves, and it says, if you don't see what you want, just ask. And that's what I think this is. They're basically saying, if you don't see what you want...
Well, they were all suggesting that they could do the job a whole lot better.
You know, can we cut that bit out?
Yeah,
no.
Let's cut
Lewis,
that because...
I've got to explain this to Lewis. In live TV... You can't remove the bits that you don't like.
There isn't a delay.
There's not. Well, no. I think next time you're on, we'll have a 5-minute delay, and we can trim out all those bits.
Lewis is used to broadcasting in his basement to no one. But the thing is, I'm just. He gets such sympathy just because he. Oh, it's nonsense.
Mean. Very mean.
We love Lewis. That's understood. That's why we can be so mean to him. But, look, Lewis said something completely false there. They are elected. These people. They're elected in their seats.
In their seats, but they're not elected to be prime minister. Prime minister, they're chosen.
Nor was Gordon Brown.
And this is...
But
no.
The members vote on it. The flaw in it was they did a debate, even though it's only the members voting. So did they need to do the debates? That's the question. And of course, Labour have used the fact they're attacking each other against.
But surely what they should have done is just been a bit nicer to each other, because they must have known. How could you not anticipate?
But Kemi's authenticity was what was so good about it. Her honesty was her whole campaign.
Yeah. But what?
We love Kemi.
They did the same when Trump and they had those debates, and Trump attacked everybody, and he was.
Well, this is always the risk, though, isn't it? And when you have this sort of kind of toxic leadership debate, and then by the end there's going to be a winner, and that winner is going to have to work with all those other people. It's going to be awkward.
It wasn't that toxic. There were all these things saying, "Oh, it's nasty, it's toxic," and I was like, "Have you seen America?" Trump was toxic to the other candidates.
Oh, I mean, in America...
Our debates were nothing. These were incredibly bad. Oh, Liz, I don't like your tax policy. Come on, that's nothing.
No, I mean, compared to Trump and Hillary in that debate where he said she should be in prison...
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's the other side. But that's the other side.
But you have
his own people, to his own Trump, to the Republicans, and the 16 other...
Yeah, that gets pretty ugly as well.
Yeah.
But you have a more pugilistic kind of politics, don't you, in America?
It's called democracy and openness, and that's something that you British people do not have.
We invented all these things.
We didn't invent democracy.
John Locke, we said before, John Locke was the precursor to your constitution. We invented your country.
You know what? Yes, you invented the country, which was the best thing that you ever did, which is why this is the greatest country on earth.
Thank you.
Because you created America.
England.
Because we created America.
Yeah.
Let's move on now. We've only got a couple of minutes, and I do want to get to some of your unfiltered dilemmas, which you very kindly send in week on, week out. And our first dilemma is from Sonia. Sonia writes, I adore Free Speech Nation and Andrew Doyle and have thought about applying to be in the audience, right? However, they say you should never meet your idols. What if I am disappointed and then I'll never be able to watch the show again? What would I do? I am really horrible in real life. You know, if you turn up here, you will not like me after that. That's not true. We're all, you know, we all, you know, we're nice people. We're good people. Lewis can be a bit difficult, but we can just keep him away. Or come on a week when Lewis isn't here. That would be the way to do it. Nick?
Definitely come in. Andrew's very nice, because it is true. I've met some sort of YouTube stars and big sort of political figures. Some of them are nicer than they seem on camera.
Yes.
Some of them are awful. Andrew is basically the same. He's the same.
He's basically the same. Right, we've got another dilemma now from Stephen in Wigan. I have an incredibly attractive boss, and I'm due for a meeting with him first thing on Monday morning. But whenever I speak to him, I'm so mesmerised by his beauty, I fail to concentrate. Any tips? It is difficult. I feel that way with Lewis sitting next to me here. He's a very dashing gentleman, and he knows he is. And I think that self-knowledge of his beauty, it makes it harder because he exudes confidence.
Did I tell you that the woman at the checkout at Virgin Atlantic, as a check-in to the plane, said to me, do you know who you look like? Jeffrey Epstein.
Wow.
I guessed Robert De Niro, but it wasn't, was it?
Why would she not keep that to herself?
I don't know, because I look like Jeffrey Epstein.
I've never...
That's not necessarily an insult. Like, he wasn't a bad-looking guy. It was more his actions that were the problem.
Goodness me.
If she said you behave like Jeffrey...
No, that would have been worse.
That would have been worse.
I think we've just got time for the last one. Daniel asks, I hate my partner's cooking, but I don't want to upset her. How can I avoid her food or tell her in the nicest way possible? No, don't tell her. I think put the food in a bag or something at the table. That's what I used to do. Just have a bag under the table, just slip it in, say, that was delicious, darling, and then get on with your life. Wouldn't that be...
You had a bag under the table?
As a child. I mean, I was 6 years old.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm the wrong person to ask because I live alone. I think Lewis is the right guy because he's been married about 5 times.
What do you think? Should he just admit that he doesn't like the food?
No, you should say, you're killing me, this food is wrong, and let me show you how to... Which is what I do, and everyone knows me. You know what it is? Food is such an important part of our health, and we're all fat and out of shape and diabetic and dying, that you need to... You can't put it in the bag and hope everything's going to be all right. No, you got to direct it.
This is why Lewis doesn't host many dinner parties.
Yeah. Anyway... We've
You've all
marriage guidance from Lewis Schaefer there. No, I think you're right that honesty in a marriage is a good thing, but I'm saying your food is horrible and you should be ashamed of yourself. That's a step beyond honesty, isn't it? That's unnecessary.
No, people need to learn, and they feel better once they've learned.
Tough love from Lewis Schaefer there. That's why we bring him on. Thanks so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Dave Chappelle had a show cancelled. Activists went after Botticelli for some reason. Stonewall urged nurseries to indoctrinate small children with their ideology. Thank you very much to my wonderful panel, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon, and to my guests, Simon Edge, Anaya Falorin-Aman, Todd Sharpville and Lois McLatchy. And, by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. It's dead easy. Please just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That is next. Later on at 11 o'clock, it will be time for Headliners, which is the paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's news stories. Thanks so much for watching Free Speech Nation. See you next week.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking quite unsettled due to low pressure, meaning it's blustery and showery for many. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in Scotland, and here the showery rain will be heavy at times and perhaps thundery too. Whilst the winds will be a little lighter today, it will still be windy. It will be a blustery and showery start for Northern Ireland too. There will be quite a bit of cloud around, meaning sunshine will be limited. Some heavy and perhaps thundery rain for parts of northwest England at first too, but it will turn drier as we head through the morning. Some showery rain for North Wales and around Merseyside. Some heavy bursts are likely and it will still be blustery, especially towards the coast and around Snowdonia. It should turn calm